Good morning, children. Today I am going to start a new story. Pip meets the convict. This is about a boy who met a convict when he was hiding in a church. This has been written by Charles John Dickens. He was born on 7th February 1812 and expired on 9th June 1870. He was an English writer and a social critic. He created some of the world's best known fictional characters and is regarded by many as the greatest novelist of the Victorian era and a literary genius man. Dickens left school to work in a factory because his father was poor, so he had to work in a factory. When his father was put into a debtor's prison, his father must have taken some money, so he was put in the debtor's prison. Despite his lack of formal education, he wrote 15 novels, 5 novellas, 100 of short stories, and non-fiction articles, lectured and performed extensively, and campaigned vigorously for children's rights. This man always fought for children's rights, and he loved children such a lot that he tried to educate them through his books and did many social reforms to help them out. Some of his best known works are The Pickwick Papers, A Tale of Two Cities, which is very famous, Oliver Twist, I think all of you have studied about it, Great Expectations, A Christmas Carol, and so on. These books are very famous because Charles John was very famous with children and children loved his books. So now I am going to start the story. Be sincere and listen to it. This is an extract from the classic novel Great Expectations, which is the story of Pip, a young orphan boy who lives with his sister, Mrs. Joe, and her husband, Joe Gregory, in the marshes of Kent in England. This boy, Pip, lived in England with his sister because I think the father had already gone to prison. So he had no place to live. So he was living with his sister and her husband. One evening, as Pip sits in a nearby graveyard, staring at his parents' tombstones, a convict pops up and orders Pip to get him food and a file from his leg for his leg irons. This man was a convict. He must have run from the jail. So he threatened Pip to go and get some food for him and a file. File is a type of iron cutter which cuts the iron rings of the leg. So he must have run from, by this we know that he must have run from the prison. My father's family name being Pirip and my Christian name Phillips, my infant tongue could make of both names nothing longer or more explicit clear than Pip. So he thought he had two names, Phillips and Pirip. So he made his name Pip. So I called myself Pip and came to be called Pip because he took his Christian name also and the name that was given to him from the family. I give Pirip as my father's family name on the authority of his tombstone and my sister, Mrs. Joe Gregory, who married the blacksmith. I think you all know the meaning of the blacksmith. Blacksmith is a man who works with iron or who cuts and makes things through iron. As I never saw my father or my mother, and never saw any likeness of either of them, for their were days were long before the days of photographs, so he had nothing to see, only his sister and her husband who took care of Pip. So he thought there were no photographs in those days, there were no cameras, so people long ago, the stories of long ago, no camera, no nothing, so he did not know how his father or mother looked. He had only a sister to look after him. My fancies, my first fancies, fancies means thought and imagination regarding what they were like, were unreasonably derived from their tombstones. He used to go and sit near the graveyard, and there he used to see the tomb of people. And from that, he just thought or imagined that how his father must be looking or how the mother must be looking. The shape of the letters of my father's gave me an odd idea that he was a square, stout, dark man with curly black hair. So he just imagined that his father must have got the shape of an square, that means a fat man, stout, dark, and had curly hair. From the character and turn of inscriptions, also Georgina, wife of the above, he always saw his sister, so he must be thinking that my mother also must be looking like her. I drew a childish conclusion that my mother was freckled and sickly because he had not seen his father and mother. So he used to go to the graveyard and try to imagine about his father and mother. Ours was the marsh country. Where he lived was a marsh country. Down by the river, within, as the river wound 20 miles off the sea. The river was far away from the sea, 20 miles far away. And the land where he lived, or the place where he lived, was by the river. My first most vivid and broad impression of the identity of things seems to me to have been gained on a memorable raw afternoon towards evening. He had a vivid thought, clear thought, and broad impression of the identity of things. He used to think, and then some vivid pictures used to come in his mind. To me, to have been gained on a memorable raw afternoon towards evening, that means he used to spend a lot of time in the graveyard and always thought about his parents because he had not seen them. Sometimes would be very happy that if the mother would have been here, she would have loved me, this and that. But today he had only his sister to look after. At such a time, I found out for certain that this bleak, without vegetation, place overgrown with nettles. Nettles are plants. That place where his house was a marshy land. What do you call it? Not good things used to grow, only big leaves and plants. And the place was also without vegetation, that was not a good fertile land. Bleak place overgrown with nettles was the churchyard, and that Philip's Pirip, late of this parish, the smallest unit of government in rural area. Parish is a place which is the small unit of government which looks after the rural area. And also Georgina, wife of the above, were dead and buried. That means his mother was also dead and buried, and he had just vivid memories and buried. And that the dark, flat wilderness beyond the churchyard. Churches are usually made at the side of the land where not populated many what do you call it, there are plain lands. Churches are built there, and at the back of the church they build the graveyards where they bury the family members who ever leave this world. So this is what he used to think, that there was dark flat wilderness beyond the churchyard, intersected with dicks and mounds. That means mounds, you call it soil up and down and all gathered place, gates all scattered where kettles used to come and feed on that long marshy land where the grasses grew, lots of grasses grew, and it was not a field type place where you could grow wheat and barley and maize. So he used to think that at the back of the churchyard, intersected with dikes and mounds and gates with scattered cattle feeding on it, was the marshes, and that the low laden line beyond was the river. From the churchyard, he could see the river beyond passing by, and always used to sit and cry and recall his parents. If they would have been there, he must be having a very wonderful life. But at present, he was living with his sister, so there must be some difficulty. And that the small bundle of shivers, growing afraid of it all and beginning to cry, was Pip. So, seeing the dark place and all those grass and kettles greasing and not a sight of human being used to make him go dirty.